Let's wait for questions. Actually, if you have questions at the end, we'll ask them, because there's a lot of information here and I don't want to get off topic.
Yeah. So today I'm going to be presenting to you guys about Saurian. It's this project that I've been helping out with for the last year. And it's a lot of reconstructing extinct animals from evidence that we know. It's very, very rooted in science. And so here's the logo for Saurian. And that's like a little icon that one of our concept artists made at the bottom. But Saurian has been going on for the last 4 years or so as this sort of passion project in response to a lack of dinosaur media that portrays dinosaurs as animals and actually does justice to the work that goes into research. You guys saw in some of the documentaries last week, like Clash of the Dinosaurs and The Last Day of the Dinosaurs, a lot of those were portrayed as monsters, and some of the things that there were inaccuracies, there were some things that were said that were not true. They were painting the paleontologists in a light that was as though treating the science as though it's just entertainment, and it's not just entertainment. So this project wants to illustrate the science in an experience that is aimed at letting people be entertained and educated at the same time. And so the objective as a player is for you to go into this ecosystem, which I will break down in a bit, and you play as any animal. There's a certain selection of animals, but you start each one as a hatchling, and then you play through its life history for as long as you can. And so these are the fun people that I've gotten to work with. You don't have to worry about any names or anything. It's just been a pleasure to work with them. I met them maybe a year ago online. They had opened up some chat rooms and they were like, hey, everybody come in. And I guess they liked me enough that they basically brought me on as a volunteer. We have all of these people, which is international. They're across the states. Some of them are in Europe. We have one guy from Argentina. And we have a team dinosaur. This is Jerry. He lives with Brian, our lead animator. And what's interesting about Jerry is not just that he's a dinosaur, but Brian has taken videos of Jerry, played it back in slow motion, and just watched it. There's no like motion capture or anything. You just learn to have a very good eye. And Jerry, being a large flightless bipedal bird, has given Brian a lot of insight as to how to animate how many of the dinosaurs move. The same goes for a lot of the animals that the team members have. Many of these belong to Brian and one of our lead programmers, Aaron. They actually live together. Yeah. And so it's not super important that you know all of these, but you'll notice as we go through each animal, some traits are going to show up in some of the design choices that we've made. And a few of our consultants, out of a list of many, include people like Victoria Arbor. She's an ankylosaur expert, and her consultation actually directed pretty much how we reconstructed our ankylosaurus. We have people like Denver Fowler, who his expertise is on ceratopsians, and he worked under Jack Horner, so his direction helped us really channel what kind of Triceratops depiction we wanted to have. There are others. Hutchinson is really good with biomechanics, so all of our animal movements and the speeds of them and their ability to jump or move or whatever is based on his research. Many, many more that aren't listed. We are incredibly grateful to them, and without them, this project wouldn't be possible. So our game takes place in Hell Creek. Hell Creek was chosen because it's a super famous locality. You have popular dinosaurs like Tyrannosaurus, Ankylosaurus, Triceratops, Hadrosaurs. They're right at the end of the Cretaceous period. And this was a floodplain environment, so something kind of like Florida. I'll get into this in a little bit. And it's been extensively researched for well over a century. So this is a well-known spot. You know, people kind of ask us like, oh, what other places would you choose for sequels? And they suggest things like Northern Africa or other not as well studied things, because they have exciting things there, but we wouldn't choose those things because there's just not enough information on them for us to really reconstruct an entire ecosystem. Harry, did you have a question?
Would you? I personally think that you should, for like say a sequel, you should do something in a different era.
Yeah, it's been talked about a lot. I'll take maybe one more question. I saw a hand, Ben.
Like if you wanted to do like a smaller area or something, you could do like the Mongolia, the one cave or something. I don't know how accurate that was.
Yeah, people have brought up the Morrison Formation, a super famous Jurassic unit, but even within each sort of, a formation is just a mappable geologic region, and that can be huge. And so we have to break it down, and we chose Bone Butte specifically, which is in South Dakota. It's about 7 square miles across. This is the last 300,000 years of the Mesozoic era, so this is a very specific period of time. And this place has been extensively studied. Some of the animals that we have chosen to be in our game are specific to this site, and I'll get into that as well. This is a sort of an aerial photo, if you will, of what Bone Creek would have looked like at the time that Saurian is set. And we know this basically because of the overbank deposits from these oxbow rivers. So they would deposit a lot of sediment, and that shows up in the stratigraphic record as they're kind of diagnostic. I kind of wish I had looked up or talked to some of the developers more about how specifically they got this, because this is kind of just, it's a good map. I'm sure there was a lot of information that went into it, but I'm more on the animal side and behavior side in terms of concepts. And so, there's a slide missing. There we go. So Hell Creek, one of the huge things that we needed to pour a lot of research and fact checking into was the plants, because the plants are so important. Not just on a food web level, but also in sort of immersing a player in an environment and creating an environment that is convincing. And one of the cool things about Hell Creek is that it's not like your typical paleo art or like the depictions that you see in like Jurassic Park. In Jurassic Park, they're on these like super tropical Amazon, Central America style island forests with like a volcano going on in the background, which this was definitely not the case for Hell Creek. Hell Creek was, there's a human for scale.
So sorry.
Hi.
Went in the wrong class.
There's a human for scale. We have a bunch of fossils from trees that would have towered over the largest animals. Tyrannosaurus being like something right there, maybe. And so this is a really richly, densely forested area. There are also things like ferns, and it's a floodplain, so there's a lot of water coming in. And there's some more plants. We had like various ferns again, mosses, things.
The graphics, dude, that's on it.
Yeah, that's a little clip of the developers kind of messing around with creating the textures and the plant setups. And so in terms of Hell Creek, in terms of precipitation and what the climate was like, Hell Creek is kind of South Dakota, I think North Dakota, Wyoming, Montana, right? So that's pretty far north compared to here. And also the paleo latitude was farther north as well. So it was seasonally, there was like a wet season and a dry season. And so here's Bone Butte specifically, and there are some comparable localities in the modern. So it looks like it's closely comparable with Texas, sort of the eastern coastal Texas. Because it is like, in terms of the map, if I were to draw it, if I have a marker here. So here's North America, right? And you've got the Western Interior Seaway here. And Hell Creek is somewhere in that ballpark, right here on this coast. And there's ocean coming in here. Bone Butte is somewhere more specific in that spot. So there's like some ocean life going on. There's like streams and rivers going on as well. Here's just a showcase of the weather. Can you guys see that very well?
Well, dude, I'm buying this game instantly.
Yep.
You should have like you should have something where
I know,
you
right?
name your dinosaur Cherry.
Can we
Get,
invest
like,
in
a
this?
hat.
Yeah.
Wait, do you like fight
Yeah, so a lot of the gameplay, which I'll get into in a moment, has to do with your niche as whichever particular animal you're playing as. So yeah, and it being far up north, it was far up north enough that we can estimate that our animals would have been able to see things like the aurora borealis. Catherine?
When does this come out?
I'll talk about it at the end. I want to avoid all the business end stuff until after we get through the paleoecology. And so now we're going to dive into our 4 main playable animals. So we have,
Such nice graphics. Wait, is that gonna be in the game though?
yeah, I don't know, like, it depends on whatever machine you're using it on. But, so our 4 playables are Dakota Raptor, which is this guy here, Pachycephalosaurus, Triceratops, and Tyrannosaurus. And our first one, which is going to be playable at early access, is Dakota Raptor Steiny. This is a man-sized raptor dinosaur, probably one of the largest raptor dinosaurs behind maybe Utah Raptor. And this was published by Robert De Palma and team in 2015. So this is a very recent find. Actually, when Saurian started, we weren't planning to have this as a playable animal. It was a very recent thing. This is the largest animal with direct evidence for wings, which is what I'll get into. But the interesting thing is, we have this very beautiful art done by R.J. Palmer, who does realistic Pokemon art as well. I don't know why. There we go. There's a running animation. Brian's beautiful work.
That's insane.
But
That looks so natural.
yeah, they've done a really good job. But the thing about Dakota Raptor is, here's a skeletal from the paper. And all that we have from it is like parts of the foot. We have parts of the arm and little bits of the tail. We have no skull. And so how the heck do we know, first off, what this skeleton looks like? And secondly, how can we reasonably estimate that it might have looked something like this, right? And an important thing is using phylogenetic relationships. So here is our Dakota Raptor ontogeny. This is what you're going to start out as, and you grow up. But it's like we only have so many bones from Dakota Raptor, and it's only that individual. How the heck do we know what the rest of these guys look like? Right, so for our juvenile, whoops, this is Bambi Raptor. It actually is not its own genus anymore. It's actually been found to be a juvenile of another Deinonychosaur, which is just another raptor dinosaur, which is closely related to this. We had to use that to help inform our proportions of the juvenile. We don't have a skull of the adult. How do we know what that might have looked like? We used Dromaeosaurus, which is another raptor dinosaur, which is, I think De Palma put them together as sister taxa. And then color patterns. How the heck do we know that, or why have we chosen that? Ben?
So say like they find the skull and then it's like a really weird, like the one with like a bunch of teeth that look like baleen. Would you change the game in order to?
Yeah.
Yeah, there are some things that would be strictly cosmetic. Let me get through this slide and then talk about that a bit. We've RJ based the color of the adult on an osprey, which its ecology is very different, but it's still a bird of prey. I mean, it's going after fish, but it's still closely enough related because Dakota Raptor is very bird-like that we could plausibly go for that. And all of the others are also based on other birds of prey. The juvenile is based on a plover. If you know what those guys are, those are the little really cute, fluffy birds on the beach that go around and run around and grab bugs and shells and stuff. But a key thing about how we reconstruct things, not only in this game, but in paleoecology in general, is we look for things that are closely related both in the fossil record and in the past when we don't have sufficient data for any one individual animal.
It's gonna be a giant.
So I saw hands from Matthew and David.
Yeah, you know the claw putting upwards on the floor?
Yeah.
Did you guys have a what do you think it is?
So I need you to be a little bit louder, but I think I got what you said. How do we know that the claw was up like that, right? So part of it is the claws generally don't show signs of wear like you would see on the other claws on the feet. Like on the feet of tyrannosaurs, the toes are very blocky and fat and kind of rounded, right? You don't see that on the big claw on there. And also the muscle attachments on that second digit kind of show that the muscles would have been pulled back like that. Jing?
How do you know that they had a beak instead of a normal snake?
That's not a beak. Those are lips on the mouth. And I can talk about that later. I'll take one last question from Kayla.
Why is it called Saurian? Like you choose that?
Saurian being a broad, it's like reminiscent of dinosaur or reptile. If we were doing something on mammals, we might go with the name Therian because that's a suffix that often goes with prehistoric mammals. Yeah. So one big thing about the behavior of our Dakota raptor, what we've chosen, is to kind of fight the stereotype of raptor dinosaurs being social pack hunters. And there's only so much evidence that goes on that. People have been basing the pack hunter hypothesis on fossil beds like this. So this is a bunch of Deinonychus, which is another raptor dinosaur. They were found with bones of not a hadrosaur, but an ornithopod called Tenontosaurus. And because these bones were found together back in like the 70s or so, people were like, oh, Deinonychus must have been hunting together to kill this big animal. And ever since, you'll see like art of Deinonychus attacking poor, helpless hadrosaurs and ripping their guts out. But just because you find animals in the fossil record together that are dead doesn't mean that you can't really accurately estimate behavior from that. So there are a lot of other factors. They could have been washed up together in some kind of flood storm. They could have been,
Or they could have
When you have died multiple
shape.
yeah.
Yeah, it could have been like a target where the guy's like, oh yeah, maybe that dinosaur just comes up. Stick to
Well, the interpretation that we've gone with is in Komodo dragons today, they don't necessarily hunt in coordinated packs or anything. But when something dies, they mob the corpse and they fight for it. Like many reptiles do this. And it seems like this might have been a scavenging site more so than a coordinated attack. That seems a plausible enough hypothesis. And so our Dakota raptors are not going to be especially social. The parents will not be taking care of the offspring for very long. And actually, in terms of the entire life history of Dakota raptor, we've chosen to model it after a Komodo dragon. The Komodos, when they're young, they're born, and then they run to the trees and they climb the trees, and they stay up there to stay away from the adults, and the adults will eat them if they run into them because they don't really care. This is how Dakota raptor is going to be played. David, do you have a question?
So the form bones inside their stomach?
Not necessarily.
Before the dynamics?
Yeah, not necessarily. I'm not super well versed in that. Harry?
So will you do like the tutorial is running to the trees? It's like, oh, avoid this and do this.
I don't know how the tutorial is going to play out. We're only doing early access right now, and it's like that's not. I don't think that's something that will like super affect gameplay for right now. A lot of the cosmetic stuff and the final touches will be added at the end. And one last question for Ben before I move on.
So a lot of like when they're born and stuff, like if you just like throw them into the game, you're not gonna know like 1, 2, 3. So is there gonna be some sort of like a box that's like instincts that's telling you what to do or something? Or like how are you gonna know what to do?
Yeah, I think that's another thing that is also like one of those final cosmetic things that we're gonna worry about later, because that's key to the player experience to understand what to do, but it's not going to affect the mechanics of the game and like the nitty-gritty of actually making the game stable and playable. So another key thing that I mentioned at the beginning was, Dakota Raptor, is we know that it had wings. How the heck do we know it had wings? Theo?
How do you distinguish the knobs, I think, of flight feathers and or insulation feathers?
That's a good question. I would say, well, let me explain what this is first to everybody who doesn't know. So on the ulna of many raptorial birds, we find knobs that support really big flight feathers, like this. And I think this is a picture from either the Dakota Raptor paper or Velociraptor. This has been found on Velociraptor as well. And they're on Dakota Raptor. And so that allows us to infer, based on that relationship, that it had flight feathers. We know from other dinosaurs that are along the line toward raptor dinosaurs that they were starting to develop flight feathers, although these were not used for flight. Dakota Raptor was much too large to actually fly. I'll get into what it was using those wings for, or what we think it was using those wings for. Here is an image of, I think that might be Dakota Raptor, but in general, this is the general raptor dinosaur claw format, right? So you've got the small, this is the hallux, this is the first toe. This is the second toe with the killing claw on it, and then you've got your other supporting toes for locomotion. Now the thing about the killing claw of raptor dinosaurs is, in media, they're often depicted as like slashing through things and like causing giant gashes and having the organs spill out. Harry, do you have a question?
I have like a guess of what you're gonna say next.
Okay.
Is it that since they're raised up, you think that they stab?
They were for stabbing and gripping, right? So these were not for slashing. There was no serrations on them. They were thin, but they were like rounded and kind of stocky. So right, Harry's absolutely right. They were stabbing, they were gripping. So what were they actually using them for? We're implementing a mechanism or a game mechanic called raptor prey restraint, and that refers to this behavior in raptor birds today. When they hunt prey and they land on a prey item, they have to pin it down before they can kill it with their beak, right? And underneath them, the prey is struggling, and so for balance, the birds will flap with their wings. So it's not just for flight, they're co-opting it for a different purpose as well. And that's what we think Dakota Raptor might have been doing with its wings and other raptor dinosaurs. They would basically hop onto these prey items, stabilize themselves until they could kill the animal. Harry?
And so do you think that's how they realized they could fly? Like, just like they got super light and then wouldn't, like, and then the thing just got just light enough to sort of hop a little bit?
There is a different hypothesis that's a little bit more plausible for the evolution of flight. I can talk about that afterward. What Dakota Raptor and other like large raptor dinosaurs were doing, they were kind of on their own lineage and pathway away from what modern birds are doing. So they are exacting an adaptation for something else, whereas the birds were exacting that same adaptation for a totally different purpose. But the mechanisms are kind of the same because you're using flapping, right? But animals like this didn't develop the flight muscles that were needed. Any other questions or comments about this section before I move on to the next animal? Okay.
Wait, actually, can we see the graphics in the game?
We will get to that at the end. Caleb.
You said it's only early release, like only
Early access.
people. Like, when is it actually being released?
I will get to that at the end. We don't have, basically, we have an early access date set, but in terms of when all of the development is done, we don't know. Is this a question pertaining to this or something else? Okay. So our next here's just a screenshot of Henry, our AI programmer, implementing the raptor prey restraint behavior into some of the game's models. So our next playable is Pachycephalosaurus. This is our adult. The skull is based on Sandy, the specimen that you guys actually saw at the Elf Museum.
I saw that.
Yeah. This is a cast of Sandy, by the way.
Oh, so we saw what it's information.
Yeah, yeah. Our Pachycephalosaurus has gone through many different iterations. You'll see at the end there's one, I have a slide with a big picture of all of the animals together, and that was an older picture before this concept art was created. Theo?
For the arms, are they vestigial?
No. So for our Pachycephalosaurus, it says species because we don't know exactly where it sits. Laura?
What exactly would be the purpose of like its horns that are sticking?
I'll talk about that in a bit. I'll get to that. So this is our ontogeny, as Gabe Santos told you guys. If you guys remember Gabe Santos talking about ontogeny. The ontogeny being the changes through a single animal's life from neonate or infant to adult. And so ours is actually a lot more solid for Pachycephalosaurus than for Dakotaraptor because we actually have specimens of these two life stages. And I think for this life stage as well, we have like some horns on the back of the skull from this. So the second to youngest life stage is based on Dracorex. I put those in quotes because this used to be designated as its own genus, and I'll get into why it's not a thing. David, did you have a question? I don't know anything about that, and that doesn't really have anything to do with this. I don't know anything about that. Dracorex was considered its own thing, and Stygimoloch, which is this one, was considered its own thing as well. But we're depicting them all as the same animal growing from hatchling to adult. Why is that? Because Jack Horner in 2009 published research on these three animals, and he was cutting into the bones of the domes of these animals. And what he found was this correlates with the adult, and that correlates with Stygimoloch. And what he found was Stygimoloch's bone density was much lower than that of Pachycephalosaurus. And that's an indication that Stygimoloch was a younger animal than the designated Pachycephalosaurus. Same thing was going for Dracorex. When young animals are forming, they're growing very quickly, and so they're trying to fill up a lot of space in a rapid amount of time. So what happens is they have a lot of pores in their bones. Adults, they've had time to grow, and now they're filling that space with more bone to reinforce it. And that's basically one of the key things as to why, not only for Pachycephalosaurus, but things like Tyrannosaurus, some of the younger forms of Tyrannosaurus used to be designated as their own genre. Now we know those are just juvenile Tyrannosaurs. Harry?
What were the A's on the head used for? Were they like saying, "Oh, I'm an adult, I'm okay for me," or something like that?
I'll get into that as well, but that's a good hypothesis as well. And the cool thing is, this one's not as obvious because this is not Sandy, and Sandy has really big spikes coming out of the head, and so that is a little bit different. But people were kind of confused by this designation of ontogeny because they were thinking the spikes on Dracorex are much more pronounced than they are on the adult. So why would they resorb the horns? And it's like, that's not really what's going on. The dome starts to grow so much that it engulfs those horns in the back. So those horns are basically still as they were when they were young, but it's just been like enveloped in bone. And so what were they using these for? I guess I split this into two parts, so give me a sec. Here's an animation of our old Pachy model, which has the shorter horns on the back running. So these are some hypotheses for what the Pachycephalosaurs were using their domes for. It's always been intraspecific combat where the males are trying to fight for rights for females. Like in the behavior of rams, there's that analog there. So, and there's the morphology kind of informs this hypothesis. but studies have shown that in terms of like the battering ram hypothesis especially, their heads wouldn't have been able to withstand that force, and they would have gotten severe concussions if they did try to do this, because like it's super dense, not spongy bone, and spongy bone is better for impacts. That's why on things like rams you see, or like musk ox and things, their domes on their heads are made of keratin, which is a lighter, more sort of ductile material that can withstand really big amounts of force. So the battering ram is kind of out. The warthog thing is also kind of out. Flank butting is reasonable enough, but you would expect to see things like healed bones on some animals, or a lot of broken bones for Pachycephalosaurus if they were to die from those injuries. The interpretation that we've decided to go with is the wrecking ball model. So they'll like swing their necks around and kind of hit the sides of each other's heads in sexual combat, which kind of models giraffes do this. Giraffes literally use their heads as hammers against each other. And some people have also applied this idea to things like sauropods. So the long-necked dinosaurs were, especially like things like Apatosaurus and Brontosaurus, they're like, yeah. The necks are so wide on those sauropods that they think that they were like whamming them together and they would have withstood that force. So that's what the Pachycephalosaurus is doing. Here's an animation to go with that. I think that after this slide we start diving into the Triceratops. So I'll take some questions. Matthew?
Is this an herbivore, right?
Yeah, it's an herbivore. The teeth are leaf-shaped, and this is actually more closely related to Triceratops than Ankylosaurus and the ornithopods are. David? For what? Yeah, that's a major behavior that we'll be using in this game as well. Harry?
What are the arms used for? Because you said they're not deciduous.
Well, just because the arms are short doesn't mean that it's not using them in some way, shape, or form. I don't know if there have been studies specifically done on the use of Pachycephalosaur arms, but in comparison to things like Tyrannosaurus and Carnotaurus, proportionally they're still much larger. Kayla?
You know how you could say you can only place 4 dinosaurs? Are there still going to be other dinosaurs like?
There will be, yeah, we're trying to encompass as much of an ecosystem as we can given the limitations of software. There will be 2 other playable animals that I'll talk about at the end, which were a Kickstarter stretch goal. I'm going to take Theo's question and then move on. Theo?
How do you know there were like dots on the body?
I think that's one of those, you mean the gray spots?
Yeah.
I think that's a
Great spot.
conjecture more so than some of the animals like the Anatosaurus that I'll show you guys later. That one is, we have mummies of a lot of hadrosaurs, and so we can very easily tell these are the size of the scales. We don't know what color they are necessarily, but based on the scale patterns, we can correlate a design based on that.
I have a yes or no question.
Yeah.
Is there a possibility of avian reptiles?
Well, birds are reptiles.
No, as in like ones with membranes.
Oh, you mean instead of bird? Like, so you have there is actually a dinosaur that had wings that were like bat wings instead of feathers. I can show you guys after all of this is done.
Okay, but will there be things like pterosaurs?
In the game.
Yeah, they're also like modern birds. I'll get into that. I will get into that at the end. So our next playable is Triceratops prorsus. This is the latter of 2 species of Triceratops known to science. The first is Horridus, and that's in the earlier part of Hell Creek. Prorsus shows up in Bone Butte, being that it's part of the last section of the Mesozoic era. This is actually old concept art of our adult Triceratops.
I know, right?
Done by R.J. Palmer. The color scheme was done by Alex Luco, who is no longer on the team. Here is our Triceratops ontogeny, and like with the Pachycephalosaurus, we have plenty of Triceratops specimens that inform us as to how the skull was changing. And you'll notice that the horns go through a lot of weird orientations before reaching adulthood. So our infant is based on the youngest Triceratops skull known to science, which is housed at the University of California, Berkeley Museum of Paleontology. And something cool to notice is that it starts out with its frill backward. The frill starts to go forward as it grows up, and it starts having these spades. And these spades either get resorbed or they get engulfed by the rest of the frill as the horns also start to point forward more. And that is at the LA Natural History Museum. Well, and that concept art was old, but Denver Fowler started pointing us in a different direction and said, you should update it. And so this is Jake's iteration, newest iteration. This will be the one that will be in the final version of the game. We currently have the old Triceratops model just still in the game for the purposes of having it there. So what did we change? We mainly changed the head, and you'll notice that on the old Triceratops, there's a very clear distinction between the texture on the rest of the face and on the horns. Here, it's all smooth, right? It's all the same. So why is that? It's because on the skull, Denver Fowler pointed out that a lot of the surface of the skull is covered in a very similar kind of texture with these grooves for blood vessels, right? This is something that we see in things like rhinoceros hornbill birds that have these big keratin, like casques, I think they're called. They're like these big horn things, and their beaks are also like this. Toucans have something similar. Cassowaries have their big casque thing on their head, the crest, and it has similar things to this. And because the texture is the same across, that tells us that whatever was on Triceratops' face was fairly, or it suggests that, not necessarily tells us. An interpretation that you could say is that because the texture is fairly uniform across the face, you can interpret that the skin covering, whether it was keratin or cornified skin like the skin on crocodilians, was on those areas. And so we've updated our model and our concept art, this is again by R.J. Palmer, to reflect that. Not all ceratopsian workers agree on this. Dr. Andrew Farkey personally disagrees with this. You guys met him on Wednesday. So in terms of behavior, this is some really early footage from like a year ago. But we've gone with portraying our animals as the females will travel in small harems. They will guard the young, but in small pods. It's not like they're herding elephants like in giant groups. And then the males are largely solitary, and then they will fight for rights to specific harems. Jerry?
You can choose your sexuality.
Yes, you can choose whether you start as a female or a male, because at its core, that does give a different experience. And so this behavior of males fighting for females and the females traveling in small groups is based very loosely on rhinoceros. And so like this, and like with the giraffe necking thing that you guys saw, a key thing in paleoecology reconstruction, let me finish my point, is you want to use close phylogenetic relationships in general, but sometimes it's okay to use analogs, as long as you admit that it's a loose analog, right? So rhinoceros and triceratops have converged on their morphology, but considering that their niches kind of overlap in a way, it's acceptable for you to use this as a reconstruction. Thea?
Are you gonna have, like, in the life cycle, when you're a young Triceratops, you try to fight off possible?
If you're a young Triceratops, you are completely helpless. You have to stay with the parents.
Oh.
Like, think back to...
No, but I mean, like, you try to fight off a potential mate of your mother.
No.
That's like a
That
really
takes place in-
specific...
that actually takes place.
Depressing.
No, but that actually takes place with rhinoceros.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they try to fight
But
off potential mates to be able to continue having like the care of the mother. Because once the new one is born, they're abandoned. And
I mean, look at the size of these animals, right?
Yeah, I did like.
You wouldn't really, if you were a young
just saw it.
Triceratops, you would not want to mess with
Look at
an
that.
adult male. Zoe, did you have a question? Okay. All right. Were there any other questions about Triceratops? Harry?
Do you, so, you said that that there were two things, they would either be absorbed or they would be like engulfed.
Yeah. So resorbing is like you have a structure and then you take it back in without necessarily changing the base of what was already there. Or it's engulfed, as in the frill starts growing over those horns. It looks like, based on these pictures, that they actually are being resorbed because like they're narrow here and then they spread out and then they start just forming with the rest of the frill. The frill too is growing, but it seems like they're like remaining in the same spot.
Okay.
They're just spreading out.
I didn't really understand everything, so I was gonna say something, but then I realized that would make sense.
Okay. Any other comments about Triceratops? That was kind of a similar thing to Pachycephalosaurus, which is why I kind of said it like that. I realized it was kind of confusing. Yeah. Okay, so our last major playable animal is Tyrannosaurus. Last but not least, this is based on a specimen named Stan from the Black Hills Institute. You guys saw Pete Larson talking in Clash of the Dinosaurs. He is the head of that institute, which is a private institute, which is ultimately okay. So this is like our second iteration of a Tyrannosaurus. Our original Tyrannosaurus looked very different from this. And so this concept art was released back in August 2015, I think, so it was a couple of years ago. And when we did that, we made an infographic as to, first off, why we changed it, and secondly, what's going on with the feathers. The feathering is based on finding other tyrannosaurs with feathers, things like Eutyrannus and Delong from China.
China had Tyrannosaurus.
Yeah, well, not Tyrannosaurus rex, but there were things related to Tyrannosaurus that were on their way to being something like this. They're all fully covered in feathers. Other dinosaurs as well, things like the Ornithischian, Calindrodromeus, other theropods, Concavinator, and Girafinator, all show scales along the tail. And these images here are scale impressions from other more closely related tyrannosaurs like Albertosaurus, Gorgosaurus, Daspletosaurus. The feet are based on ostrich. The color scheme in general is based on an emu, basically. So Jerry.
So if you name your T-Rex Cherry, will we get some special?
I don't know, actually. Achievements are going to be a thing, and I helped write a good handful of them. But there are a lot of inside jokes. But at the beginning of last month, actually, there was a paper that was published, and the gist of it was like tyrannosaurs were most likely scaled, and the only place that you'd find the feathers is along the back. But we actually looked into it, and all of the scale impressions that they were using were like coin-sized, and they were all things that we already knew. So one of our developers, Tom Parker, made this infographic to kind of illustrate that pretty much our Rex was where it needed to be. The only thing that would need to change is some of these feathers would need to go, and so the leg would be bald. But everything else, this is still mostly plausible. Some of the neck scales that were described in the paper were kind of ambiguous as to where on the neck they were. Like, were they on the bottom of the neck? Were they on the back? We don't know because the authors didn't say. So yeah, are there any questions about Tyrannosaur feathering? Because I figure it was also cool enough in Hell Creek that overheating wouldn't really be a problem. Tyrannosaurus also has air sacs, just like any other theropod or Saurian dinosaur in general, so thermoregulation would have been eased by that. Feathers also are good at blocking out sunlight, and they're also good at trapping pockets of cool air, even though they're also good at insulation. And a note on these feathers, these are not nearly as advanced as the feathers that you guys saw on Dakota Raptor. These are at
Down
most
feathers.
like down, not quite downy for these. These are more like the emu feathers that you saw on Jerry. So the Jerry ones, they have the stem and maybe some barbs, but it's not super complex. This is about as complex as we would expect to get with a Tyrannosaurus. Here's our Tyrannosaurus ontogeny, and this one is also, I would say Dakota Raptor is our most like speculative in terms of how much it correlates with the fossil record. So all of these, each life stage is based on a specimen of Tyrannosaurus. Our juvenile is based on a skull of Chomper. I think that's with the Museum of the Rockies in Montana. This is nicknamed Jordan. He's at the Los Angeles Museum of Natural History. This is Jane. She is our teenager Rex, she, because we don't know the sex of these fossils. And the interesting thing about Jane is that this specimen has been used time and again to disprove a concept or a hypothesis of an animal called Nanotyrannus. If you guys have heard about that, it's a small tyrannosaur that people sometimes think lived alongside the full-size Tyrannosaurus. But looking at the bones of animals like Jane and the Nanotyrannus kind of informed that they were indeed younger animals. And our last one I've already mentioned is based on Stan. Stan was about 18 years old when he died. I had the ages of these various animals. Yeah.
Legal adult.
Legal.
Question, Harry?
What is the estimated average age of death?
For a Tyrannosaur?
Yeah, of old age.
Yeah, of old age, it would have been something like, Sue, the biggest Tyrannosaur that we have. That one is something like 28 to 30 years old. I find it interesting about Tyrannosaurs that they're kind of growing like us humans. Like, they start out as really gangly, awkward little babies, and they stay very, Jane is really awkward for an animal. She's super leggy, and she's kind of flimsy and everything. And then she hits puberty, and then they get this huge growth spurt into these massive freaking face-biting monster things. Kayla.
So, is it just kind of when you evolve or whatever, or you go out to the next stage, is it just gonna change automatically, or is it gonna be gradual?
We're trying to get an animation sort of gradual change, but for now it's going to be popping in and out.
And I have a second question: is there can you die in 4 in this game?
Yeah, there are various modes.
And is that success?
And if you died, you restart.
Yeah.
Drought mode.
There's like a permadeath mode, but I can talk about that later.
It means
Can you
permanent
get
death.
bombarded by an asteroid?
That is also a different game mode that I can talk about.
So awesome.
Yeah, so yeah, and also I brought this up with Dakota Raptor as well, but also realized that you're starting as a really tiny dog-sized animal to something really huge. Do you think the niche of those age groups are going to be the same?
No.
Not even.
Yeah, exactly. There's niche partitioning within the ontogeny of a single
And
animal.
the beak also not the beak, the
Mouth.
skull, the mouth kind of reflects that.
Yeah, you're starting from a really narrow,
Yeah.
dinky little skull to something that very quickly over the course of maybe 5 years after hitting puberty becomes very broad and robust. So they're inherently doing different things with their bodies. They're inherently doing different things with their skulls. Another cool thing that's kind of a parallel between humans, very loosely, is that there are hunters in Africa who chase prey, long distance running, and they just endurance run until the prey gets tired. And apparently humans are very good at running and not getting tired for long distances. Tyrannosaurus, at least some specimens kind of indicate that it was much less of an ambush predator and more of a long distance runner. I'm going to chase you until you're tired, and then I will knock you down and rip you apart. And here's Jordan. These two specimens are not going to be featured in the game, but this is a display at the LA Natural History Museum. So if you guys are still in town at some point or ever come back, I fully recommend seeing this dinosaur hall. Kayla.
Is there multiplayer mode?
There will be eventually.
You should set up a server.
Catherine.
Are the day, how long is each day gonna be?
We don't know yet. We don't know the time stuff
Maybe
yet.
there would be a sleeping mode.
The gameplay stuff is a little different. So in terms of, this is a Natosaurus, also known as a Edmontosaurus. We chose the name Anatosaurus because our definition for what a genus is was determined by time constraints. It's something called a generic chronometer. Basically, what is your definition of genus? Are you consistent with it? As long as you're consistent with it, it's okay. In terms of, one of you was asking about scale patterns. For Anatosaurus, we know that at least the scale shape of this, because we have extensive mummies of Anatosaurus and things like Edmontosaurus and things that are immediately related in sister taxa to this. Harry.
What are those two really tiny things next to the baby?
I was just about to get into that. So the main thing about this slide, there was a little Anatosaurus tangent, because this is the only time you're going to see this in this slideshow. There's also another one there. So this is parenting behavior from the Tyrannosaurus, and I'm going to get into that. So pretty much all of the animals in Saurian are precocial animals. You guys know that that's like, they're pretty much almost ready to go when they're born. And Tyrannosaurus has probably the longest parenting time in the game, and that's still not very long. It's maybe 1 year, 2 years. It's not very long. So in our game, the male and the female, they mate. The female lays the eggs and leaves them with the male, so she just goes off and does her own thing. And the male is stuck with the babies for a year, and he shows them around. He does. Laura?
How exactly does time work on this one?
That's more of a business end kind of thing. I want to kind of stay focused with the ecology. Jing?
What's that thing in the bottom left corner?
This is a crocodilian, I think. There are a bunch of crocodilians in this game, and I'll get into that.
Will we be able to play as a crocodile?
No, we're only playing dinosaurs. And that parenting behavior is based on ratites like the cassowary and the rhea. They all do this thing, the sort of male parenting thing where the babies are left with the dad. The dad kind of shows them around, shows them kind of how to forage for food in a very rudimentary way, and the babies are off to take care of themselves and grow up on their own. I think the crocodilian is in there also because it's an archosaur. The parenting's not super similar, but it's also hairy.
Something interesting about crocodile, or I'm not sure if it's specifically alligator or crocodile, but I know that it's at least one of the crocodilians. I'm pretty sure it's almost all crocodilians. Is they have like an urge whenever somebody like is on their tongue to bite down, and they basically have to fight that when they're like parenting them.
Yeah, that's really cool. I didn't know that. I don't think you'll be picking up your kids as a Tyrannosaur dad. But this is also going to serve. What?
Could you eat your kids in this game?
I guess you could, but I feel like that would defeat the purpose of going through the trouble of courting a mate. Like, courtship is going to be a major game mechanic. Mating is not. I mean, mating is like.
What it should be is.
It's going to be different for each
If
animal.
you kill your kid, there should be an achievement called like. It should be called like Parent of the Year in quotation marks. And it should have like a picture of them.
So yeah. Again, this again is to drive home this phylogenetic relationship thing for reconstructing paleoecology and extinct animals. And now I'm going to segue into something a little bit different, but is immediately related. Sound design. Sound design, specifically for a Tyrannosaurus, is based on, again, this group of animals. And that's because, and not like modern birds or mammals. Mammals are problematic as a model for sound design because we have the same throat organs. They're called larynxes. advanced birds have these things called syrinxes, which allow them to do complex bird song. We don't have that. We have a larynx. Mammals and like the base, like all reptiles and the base archosaurs, they all have the larynx. We have a diaphragm though, and that makes our sound production different. These guys don't have a diaphragm, but they have the larynx, and because of that, they're able to do really deep sounds. Can you guys hear that?
Yeah, I heard it.
I think it's coming from the computer. Yeah, I think this sound doesn't come out well if you're not wearing headphones, but the cassowaries are known for having really deep rumbling sounds, and they have the deepest calls of any living bird on the planet. You can't even hear this because the speakers can't play this well. They're using things like infrasound, the low rumbling that vibrates through the ground. We're not going to do that right now. Let's see, another one. Let's see where was it?
It's here.
Crocodilians do something similar. They're doing this sort of gargling, growling thing. And so the roars that you hear in Jurassic Park aren't especially accurate because those are based on like big cats, and those aren't closely related to things like tyrannosaurs. And so our sound designer kind of messed around with these concepts and made sounds for our Tyrannosaurus based on the crocodilians and cassowaries and things of that nature.
It kind of sounds like the lion.
Kind of, but the lion also has a little bit more oomph because it's got that diaphragm going. Also, the sound playback on this is not very good.
There's no like giant roar that we
Yeah,
always see in movies.
because that's not very realistic, and animals don't generally, especially not. Right, there's an elephant, there was like a tiger in that Jurassic Park roar, and that's not really true to paleoecological reconstruction.
Wait. Elephants roar?
No, but I'm talking, so I think it was Jing or Jerry that brought up the Jurassic Park roar. The Jurassic Park roar was designed with a baby elephant, a tiger, and I think a crocodile somewhere in there. But that's not really true to paleoecological reconstruction because those things are not, except for the crocodilian, those things are not closely related to Tyrannosaurus, and their mechanism for producing sound is inherently different. Here is just a running animation of our Tyrannosaurus that was done back in 2015 or so.
Dude, that's so cool.
Yeah. This is on 360 pixels as well. So that's pretty good.
Yeah, can we? Do you have like a model of the Saurian?
We'll talk about that at the end.
Well, pay subscribers.
Oh my! I'm subscribing right now.
In the game,
Yeah. Ben?
I saw it said like Saurian gameplay footage, but it wasn't by Saurian game. Like, did that person steal it or something?
I think I know who that is, who you're talking about, so it's not really a big deal. Guys, I'm not done. Getting toward the end though. And another interesting thing that I wanted to illustrate to you guys is that Dakotaraptor, again, was published in 2015. This is a Chiroraptor, a smaller raptor dinosaur that was published in something like 2014. And we've known about Bone Butte and Hell Creek for well over 100 years. So for the longest time, we were thinking, what we got from the fossil record was Tyrannosaurus was the only predator, and all of its life stages were occupying all of the predator niches in terms of dinosaurian predator niches, right? That's not realistic in terms of what we would expect in a living ecosystem. And so with the discovery of Dakotaraptor and Chiroraptor, we find that it was much more like modern ecosystems. This is a collection of predators in an ecosystem or a community is called a predator guild. And in a predator guild, each predator does its own thing. You see all of these guys are meat eaters, but pretty much, I trust that you guys know this well enough, The lions are doing something inherently different from the leopards. The leopards are going up in trees so that they don't compete with the rest of these guys. The cheetahs are running really fast after super fast prey. Dogs are being in social groups and they're hunting in packs, and they are kind of barraging their prey and also stealing from others. Hyenas, they're kind of doing something similar to dogs, but they're crushing bones and they're scavenging on top of hunting. So each of these guys is doing something different. And that's, with the addition of Dakotaraptor and Akiraraptor with new science, we find that that's what was kind of going on in Hell Creek. You had the different life stages of the Tyrannosaur. You had the baby, the subadult doing, or the mid-teenager doing this thing. The adult was going around after the biggest animals. But then you had Akiraraptor, which would only grow about this big, going after some small stuff. And then Dakotaraptor was also doing its own size range of prey. And that is not unlike modern predator guilds. That's something that I want to illustrate too, is that an animal's ecology is not limited to that animal. It has to do with all of the interactions that it has with other animals. And you can reconstruct an ecosystem with homologs with each of these animals as well as analogs. And you can see patterns in the modern based on uniformitarianism and based on the fact that these things can be replicated, that they are likely happening in the past. And so having an ecosystem where it's just Tyrannosaurus, that's really weird. And this is a lot more normal than what we previously knew. I saw a lot of hands go up in the last few minutes. Harry.
Is the Archaeoraptor supposed to look like a really angry baby?
I think that's what RJ was going for. This is like, I forget what kind of pheasant this is based on. There's like some king vulture with the eye, a lammergeier with like the back legs and the wings. But yeah. And that's Raptor. For anyone who wants to know. Jing?
You said you would show us the dinosaur with a membrane first.
That's not in this game. That was like after
Can
we're
you show
completely
us?
done. I'll do that one after we're completely done and we've moved on to something else. Harry?
What are the two other playable things? So you said there were 4 main ones.
There are 2 other ones. It's limitations of funding. It's also like playability. Like we wouldn't choose crocodilians because they're kind of sitting around and basking in the sun, which for some people would be fun, but for most people it's not worth the resources to pour into programming that. Ben, do you have a question?
As far as what you're doing, like, would you have to be competing with other AI for like?
Absolutely. AI is a huge part.
Would there be, as you go through the game, would there be like different modes, like if the AI is too hard for some people or something, or is it just all or you just really?
Also,
I think there are
you know,
difficulties, yeah.
multiplayer. Could that be done?
That's going to happen much later, but that's in the works because we did get enough funding to do that. Are there any other questions about Predator Guild ecology, as it's called? I wanted to illustrate this to you because there is a strong parallelism between ecology levels in paleo environments and the modern. Theo.
Will there be like arboreal lifestyles and like arboreal phases?
Yes, Dakotaraptor is, as I said earlier,
Yeah.
the babies are going to climb trees. You're going to be able to climb trees and glide from tree to tree, but as it gets bigger, being that the dinosaurs are really stiff in the shoulders, and they can't really maneuver around like we can. So as you get bigger, not only are you gaining weight, but you're also being more and more limited by your physical stiffness in your skeleton. So Dakotaraptor, as an adult, I think subadult even, loses that ability to climb, and then its ecology very much changes. Jing.
I have a question on the game mechanics.
Okay.
So, would the game be based on the health system, or would it be like if you, say you attacked a dinosaur and hurt its tail and then it ran away, would it lose its balance? So would it be more of a component?
There are like health user interfaces. There's like health, thirst, stamina,
But
food.
If you were attacking another animal,
Yeah,
would
that's
it be like, oh, you've hit it and it deals a certain amount of damage?
Or would it
Would
actually
be
feel damage?
like, would you see the damage and would it actively affect the other dinosaur?
It would. I would imagine it would affect the dinosaur. That's not a question for me. That's a question that I can send over to our programmers who know a lot more
It should be
about
like
that.
if you damage something, it would detect the heal, but
Oh,
then
yeah.
it would also affect you if you like run away and you're probably gonna fall. Like, if you
Yeah.
hit the tail or something.
Harry.
About like what they're talking about, there's a game called Urvogel with a really interesting sort of health. I use health really loosely, but it's instead of like instead of like your whole body does the same amount of damage except for like your head does extra damage. It has like a bone-based thing, so if like say you hit the neck, you get a lot of damage, and if you hit say like the toe, it might just stun.
Yeah. Those are all interesting things to think about. I'm not exactly sure how specific the health system is going to be. We're pretty much at a point where we have good confidence of what we know, but I've been very hands-off lately, so I can ask the devs how that's going. Other Hell Creek dinosaurs. So this is one of our other playable animals that we got in the Kickstarter. This is Anzu Wiley. This is related to things like Oviraptor. It is not an Oviraptorid. It is actually in its own group called the Cagnathids. I don't remember exactly the distinction, but notice that here's the male and here's the female. And that's extreme sexual dimorphism. Most of the other animals that you'll be playing as have visual dimorphism, as in the males and the females will have some color distinctions between them, but not size. We chose size distinction for this one because there's a whole range of sizes of adult Anzu in Hell Creek, and this is just one possible interpretation for why that is. You'll notice the male is super colorful. This is common in archosaurs in general. Like, think of the peacocks. A lot of the males in our game will be more colorful than the females. The Tyrannosaurus will have like a blue pouch on the males, on the neck. One gameplay mechanic that we're adding to Anzu for flavor is it'll be able to mimic the calls of other animals in the game, so that'll be fun. The next one is Ankylosaurus. This is our other playable animal.
It's playable?
Go.
It'll be playable eventually. These two, so we had a Kickstarter campaign. One of the stretch goals for the Kickstarter was you guys get to vote on 2 animals that can be added to the game to be playable. These are the ones that won
But
from people.
wouldn't playing that kind of boring because you eat grass all day?
Yeah, we also
Yeah.
You have to every like 15 minutes. A predator finds it, like you
Actually,
have to speed it plays.
The map is huge, and so it's not like you'll be running into animals all the time. It's like going to be like a realistic ecosystem. You're going to be like a normal animal in. It looks like a moth.
Yeah.
Don't worry about it.
It's just
Don't worry, it's good.
Theo.
It says that over there it's a male. Is there going to be sexual dimorphism between males and females?
Again, color distinction. That's about it. There is no good evidence, no solid evidence for size dimorphism in many dinosaurs because our sample sizes are not nearly large enough to determine that. So if anyone,
Did we explain sexual dimorphism?
do you guys know what sexual dimorphism is?
Yeah.
Okay.
For those who don't, it's when the 2 genders of a species have visual differences between them.
So like peacocks and males, they have the much larger feathers and more colorful than the females. That's a good one. Ankylosaurus is another one. I kind of agree with Jerry myself. Anatosaurus was up for grabs in the vote, but people didn't vote for that one for whatever reason. So that's Ankylosaurus. Another one, this is Alvarezsaurus. It's this very small bipedal, I think theropod dinosaur with little itty-bitty claws on its hands, probably to grab insects. That'll mostly be like a food item. This is Ornithomimus, and this is going to be, I think, the fastest animal in the game. Having Jerry around really helped kind of inform this guy. And there are a couple of other dinosaurs as well. The reason that I haven't included Anatosaurus in this is because Anatosaurus was only in Bone Butte seasonally. So it would come maybe for a month in the year and then leave for the rest. And we probably know that based on, there's this thing at the tar pits that you guys are going to see on Thursday that I can point out, where there are bison, and there are very specific age groups of bison that show up. There aren't any age groups in between. So you have some that are 2 months old, some that are like 10 months old, and then another group that's 24 months old, and they only come in those groups. So they're coming into the ecosystem at very specific times. And that might have been what was going on with Anatosaurus. I don't exactly know that one. And a key thing to note about paleoecology is that you don't just have one type of animal. These are a whole bunch of other animals that are not dinosaurs. You've got Hell Creek is super well known for its turtle collection and its crocodilians. We have a mosasaur in there. This is Paleoecological, which is basically a super ancient giant Gila monster that was swallowing dinosaurs.
Left and right.
This is Chamops. That's our smallest animal in the game, something like a little over a foot long from head to tail. Again, we have turtles. We have 3 crocs that will be featured in the game. And just like with modern ecosystems, they're all doing different things. They have their own crocodilian guild. Brachychampsa has mushroom teeth that are used for crushing shells, so it's probably eating things like turtles. Borealisuchus was your kind of traditional Nile crocodile, so it's eating terrestrial prey, probably. Thoracosaurus is like your modern gharial. It had very thin, cone-like teeth. I'll get to questions after I'm done talking about this slide. Mosasaurus is going to act like a border guard, so you're not supposed to go very far in the water.
Wow.
And as a consequence, you will get eaten by this guy if you mess
Oh,
with
kind
him.
of like in Battlefield 4 where if you stand on the thing, the megalodon comes out and eats.
Oh, really? That's a thing?
Yeah, and there's like a buoy, and when people stand on it, a gigantic megalodon comes out and like flips while eating people.
That's cool. This is Champsosaurus. Champsosaurus is actually not a croc, even though it looks like a croc. So it's mimicking. And probably the last major showcase animal is Quetzalcoatlus. You guys saw the giant one in the museum. In Hell Creek, we only have a smaller version that's about this size. It doesn't have a species designation to it. And actually, I have an animation for you guys.
Dude, I love this game.
The pretty bird.
At the camera.
So this was captured in virtual reality, and we eventually will implement virtual reality.
Like HTC Vive.
Yeah, like Vive. That's what the developers, I think, are using.
Okay, cool.
11. There we
That's
go.
awesome.
And so yeah, Hell Creek is this widely, broadly diverse ecosystem full of all sorts of different kinds of animals that are doing all sorts of different kinds of things.
Why is that one floating?
Because I think RJ and the developers really love Champsosaurus, because our modeler, the guy who makes the models for the games, for the longest time was refusing to make this guy. He was like at the back of the list of priorities because we had things to worry about like Triceratops. I think the only animal that I didn't mention in the slideshow was Denversaurus. It's a relative of Ankylosaurus. It's going to be super grouchy and mean. This is our old Pachycephalosaurus. Notice that the horns are very absent, pretty much. Yeah, so it shows all of pretty much the life stages. So you've got the adult Triceratops, you've got the infant, the juvenile, the older juvenile here. You've got adult Tyrannosaurus, the next younger one. Various stages of Dakota Raptor. This is the old Quetzalcoatlus art that RJ did.
Which kind of looks like it's using its back half.
Yeah, I think the neck is not. It's behind the Paleoecological there, but it's behind that. And what I really want to illustrate here is this is just a menagerie of all sorts of different organisms. And so yeah, that's basically it. So the key things are phylogenetic relationships inform how we reconstruct ecosystems. The modern is the key to understanding the past.
Can we see the graphics?
And so yeah, the future for Saurian, it will be released on Steam July 31st, I think for $20. And yeah, and as we get,
Can I write it down? Oh my god.
that's fine.
Wait, what's
I don't.
Steam?
Steam is this platform where you.
Greatest game
Steam is
ever.
motivator.
Jing is right about that. And yeah, so, and as new information, we are going to try to integrate as much as we can given the window of time that we have. But Saurian is really this is what we know about this ecosystem circa 2017. Like, there's a point at which we have to stop and say, we gotta let this go. We gotta let this be its own thing. And this is a snapshot of science at this time. Because eventually this will get outdated, and that's okay.
But you
Matthew.
can still update the game though.
Yeah, but eventually we're gonna stop updating the game and move on to something else if that's what happens. Matthew?
If we buy the early access, will we also get the full game?
Yeah, I think so. Ben?
When you do like in terms of
We're all
moving
in.
on, rather than doing like Saurian 2, I think you should probably do things like especially for like multiplayer, instead of just being in like a creek area, you could maybe explore areas.
No, yeah,
Like,
so for
maybe since
sequels,
you're there.
yeah, so for sequels, we've thought about doing the Western Interior Seaway. So like, let me draw a map of Cretaceous North America again, so very simplified, right? So Hell Creek's over here. A possible sequel would be the Oceans of Kansas, which is somewhere over here, but it would be more aquatic themed. What are you guys doing? Oh, don't.
Can you go please?
What is it?
Can you guys like not freak out? It's not gonna hurt you if you don't.
It's not gonna do anything.
Calm down, guys.
For it. I'll keep it back here, okay? Come on, pay attention.
Okay, so yeah, were there any final questions before we were gonna move on to the very last leg of thing that I'm gonna show you? Theo.
Of the animals that are there any animals that you didn't talk about in the game? And if so, are there any mammals or
There will be 2 mammals. I will talk about one of those mammals tonight.
Oh my god, okay, let's wait for this wasp thing to get over because you guys apparently can't pay attention when there's a wasp in the room.
Oh,
Yeah. Wow, that's good.
Oh, is it gone? Okay.
Alright, hold on the wall.
Okay. We get that you're celebratory right now, but are there any questions about the slideshow before I move on to the next thing? Because the next thing is pretty cool too.
Yeah.
Oh,
Quiet.
can we
Okay.
take a picture of this slide?
Yeah, that's fine.
Can you send-
There. Yeah, I mean, if you just Google Saurian, you should be able to find.
Can you send me this slideshow?
I can do that at the end of the session. I'm not gonna gather your contact info before the end, because that's weird.
And I don't think we're allowed to.
Yeah, I don't think we're allowed to either.
There's some policies.
Yeah.
How long is the
Mayor?
ban on the phone?
Are you guys gonna have like an app, or is it just gonna be like a website?
It's gonna be a mainly PC Mac game. We're not gonna have a mobile.
Is there a website on this?
Yes,
What is it?
it's right there.
We have my parents will get anything.
Mac is eventually going to be implemented. We're gonna start with PC and then we're gonna move on to Mac. And speaking of PC, I have the pre-release version and ready.
Oh! Woohoo! Let's
Can I watch you
go!
play for a little bit?
Yeah. So how much time
Can I?
do we have?
Steve.
We have 20 minutes, and there are many of you who probably want to play. So,
I think it's best if you play.
You play.
Yeah,
No, you just play. You just play.
Nobody else plays.
I'm
just
not
like
gonna play until you guys let me answer questions. Jing.
How long did you set the ban on the floor?
What?
How long did you set the ban on the floor?
What do you mean by ban?
You said something about
How long you can? How much time there is?
yeah, how much time
how many
you
points
have
you
between.
Oh, that's on that's on Discord. So that's a chat thing that is separate from Steam. That's what I do. As my job on the team is to basically moderate the online community, and I also look at things like this and I report problems to the developers for them to improve upon. Ben?
Wait, actually, yeah. So is there a Discord?
Yes.
What is this?
Like within your own group or like for a community?
Discord is basically a chat room platform for gamers. It's like Skype, but no video. I will not give you guys access to that until the end of the session.
And then second question is, can we get the pre-release demo?
Pre-release was for people who backed the Kickstarter with $60. So the window to buy pre-release is not open. It closed a long time ago. Actually, like a year ago.
Can we pay now and just get it for a reduced price?
Well, early access is not a thing. I mean, you can get early access for $20, which is cheaper than getting pre-release.
Well,
So,
we will have time because after lunch we'll go to the computer lab, but after that we will have some time.
okay, that's fine. So there are 3 scenes in pre-release, and this was just to give people a taste of some of the game mechanics. So in this build, we are doing raptor prey restraint, as I was talking about earlier. So I'm gonna try to hop on top of this Pachycephalosaurus.
That's so cool. Whoa.
Oh, it's a little laggy.
Yeah, I know. Come on. Yeah, so Dakota Raptor has been estimated to be able to jump like 13 feet in the air from standing, based on, I
Will he
think,
headbutt you?
Oh,
yeah,
dude, that's
he's
so
mad.
cool. Whoa,
He's mad.
I love this game.
Jump
Jump on him. Jump on him.
He's gonna get me real quick. Oh, come on. Oh, come on. Notice Notice that I'm like helping out with this game, but I'm really bad at playing games. I know the science a lot better.
Are they gonna?
Jump
Jump
now.
now.
You're way too
Oh
late.
no. God, come on. Okay.
Yeah.
And so now I'm biting the crap out of it, and it's dead. And
Good
now,
job.
No, eat it.
yeah. What is going on? Oh, I have food in my mouth already.
Ew.
Okay.
So you have to physically swallow it.
Yes.
That's cool.
No, it's the ragdoll effect.
Oh
so,
no, it's glitching out.
Yeah. So notice that my green bar, which is my food, it's starting to fill in with like yellow because I'm eating more food. The blue is for water and the red is general health. As I run, that circle starts to get smaller and that's signifying stamina. And
And the
there's
hunger just keeps going down.
yeah, and if any of these run out, then I start losing health. Or like stamina.
running out really fast.
Yeah.
No, stamina is something that you have to let recharge, but you don't lose health for.
But the
Will
hunger
there
runs
be a
out
better
too fast.
jumping animation in the future?
Yeah, this is pre-release, and this is like a pre-alpha even, basically.
That's really
That's
bad.
really cool.
Is it?
But this
Is there gonna be like a different way of acceleration? Because the acceleration seems really.
Yeah, there's like a weird lag between when you press the buttons and do an action. And I think that's already being fixed. This was released on June 8th, and a lot has happened since then. No, I'm not losing health. That's my stamina being gone. So that's like if you run really hard and then you have to catch your breath, and it sucks.
Can you try other dinosaurs now?
Not so in early access. You're gonna start as Dakota Raptor. David?
See, it's hard, dude.
Yes, there is absolutely no first person.
How would that wouldn't really.
But it looks cooler if third person though.
Yeah.
So you can see how you jump.
Yeah.
And you can see which one.
Will it have
And
lens
you can
flare?
see your arms.
I don't think lens flare is gonna be a thing.
That's a really cool one.
Will it have day and night cycle?
Yeah. Yeah.
Environmental showcase.
Maher.
Are you gonna like later have it where like you can play like other people like the servers?
Trolling.
You mean multiplayer?
Yeah.
Yeah, there will eventually be multiplayer. So let me explain this really quick. So this is just an observation scene where you get to, oh my gosh, the lag. You get to watch the animals kind of do stuff.
But there's a dinosaur. Why there's
Let's see,
Oh, wait,
where.
what's that?
Those are bushes.
So here is some Borealisuchus in the water. It's really pixelated. That might be just the settings for this
Wait,
computer.
No, no, no,
is the ground
it's
gonna
good, it's
look
good, it's
different
good.
later?
The what?
Is it gonna look like? No.
This is, again, this is pre-release, and this is just to give people a broad idea of what's
No,
going
no,
to go
no,
on.
the pre-release is
fighting?
really bad.
I think so. You can see blood on the Borealisuchus. On one of them, you see the red on there?
Wait, so I have a question.
Yeah.
Are there gonna be animals that are like, are you gonna implement like nocturnal and diurnal animals so that some animals are only present at night or at day or during the day?
I think most of our animals are largely diurnal.
Is that the T-Rex?
Yeah, this is our Tyrannosaurus.
So it's going towards the.
Wait, can we look at a mosasaurus?
We don't have Mosasaurus in this.
Oh,
Oh,
whoa.
it's swimming. Let's go. Oh, lag. Jing?
I have something to ask about
Yeah.
reptiles. Reptiles are cold-blooded, so then how come they, some of them can hunt at night?
Cold-blooded is kind of an outdated term. Hunting at night. Give
So
me
like
an
the
example.
T-Rex.
Well, tyrannosaurs. The thing about dinosaurs is there's a lot of evidence that they're more on the endothermic end of the spectrum, so they were able to produce enough body heat to be able to function at pretty much most times, if not all times. So they're not unlike mammals in their metabolism. Ben?
What's the game rating gonna be for this? Like, is
You
it
mean,
gonna
like,
be really
age rating?
graphic and like?
I think we're gonna toggle the blood, so you can either turn it
Oh wait,
on.
one of them.
It's so bad, man.
I think one
But
of
then
them's
like
dead.
with courtship and stuff.
You're going to try to court a mate and win them over, but mating animations are not going to be a thing. We're not
Oh,
going
whoa.
to show intercourse. This is
Good.
this is a Chiroptr. Let me actually get a shot of it.
It does look like a really angry baby.
Yeah, a Chiroptr is kind of spooky looking because that eye is just always open. Are there any other? I'm going to try to find a Dakota Raptor or a Packy here.
I think it's over there. Turn. Over there.
Cut?
Over where?
There.
Cut?
Oh, there it is.
For the animals?
Oh man. Oh, they're fighting. Oh,
It's
shoot.
also
What was your question, Jing?
For the animals in the water, if they get hit, will, say you put the blood on the maximum, will the blood seep into the water? How realistic will it be?
We're gonna try to make it.
Raptor.
Pachycephalosaurus is a beast in this.
you should nerf it.
Yeah, the Packy is pretty OP.
Balance.
In terms of like blood filters and stuff, those are things that we are going to basically focus on at the end of development. So I feel like that's a question that it's still soon to try to ask because it's so detailed.
Gotta eat
Have
it.
you seen the T-Rex try and kill the Pachycephalosaurus?
I'm sure, yeah, and they've succeeded. The T-Rex is also pretty OP.
Oh, it's hunting for something.
Those fully grown T-Rex.
Oh, he just stole
there it
the
goes.
carcass.
Did he just steal the food?
Yeah, he stole the food.
And
And
then
he ate him too, man.
He ate 2 bites.
He's like, okay, guys, I need a snack.
Yeah, I mean, remember, Tyrannosaurs have those really stout, fat teeth, which are good for bone crushing, and they gulp down everything.
T-Rex, the spawn.
That's like the hack to the
Spawn
game.
camping.
Yeah. There's a Triceratops over here. There have been many Triceratops T-Rex fights in these builds.
I want his stuff.
You have to stick around quite a bit. I'll let you guys mess around with this after lunch.
Okay, so can we see the third one?
Yeah, the third one is an environment showcase. So in this one, this will be sort of the immersive.
I like the loading side.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, that's fun. I forget who came up with that. That's a good
Use
idea.
a Google Chrome, no internet.
Thing, yeah.
Yeah, and then
You can like jump.
So
Oh,
this is kind of what the This is a bit laggy probably
Yeah, that's a lot
because
better than
there's
the
so
previous
much going on. The
Well,
previous
every
ones
other
were just
animal's
highlighting player mechanics and
Yeah, I'm buying this.
Now?
it's not available to buy yet. It'll be available at the end of the month.
31st of July. I'm buying
Can we
this.
pre-order?
But I need
I
a
don't know.
No, you don't.
I don't think pre-ordering is a thing.
How many people have it
Well,
right
you
now?
can make it.
Pre-order it.
Hey Todd,
What's
Are you
up?
controlling the
could you
dice?
make it available to all on
But like the
Steam?
free part.
I think we're gonna. I don't see any reason why not.
No, I think
Some
Steam
games,
is all.
This is-
Some games they don't.
Try to eat something, Kyle.
There are no AI in this version. This is just to show the ecosystem as it will sort of appear in the final version.
So this is sort of what it would look like.
This is what it would look like, yeah. And then there's also, if we stick around long enough, we can see the day and night change as well.
Hey Todd, can you try?
I heard a question from Catherine earlier. Catherine, did you have a question? No? Okay.
Todd,
Can we go back to T-Rex and Triceratops fight?
Can you spawn things
What
in
time is
with
it?
console?
I don't think we're gonna have anything with console.
Hey, Todd.
Because we don't have enough money for that. What's up?
No, I isn't like console coming out.
Oh, I don't know anything about that.
could you try and climb a tree?
Is that in this build? I don't know if that's in this build.
Just try jumping at a tree.
Yeah,
Yeah.
try jumping out of it.
If you get a concussion, okay.
Let's see. I don't know if and like also keep in mind if you do see the adult climbing, that's not what's gonna happen in the final
Yeah,
game.
isn't he like yes?
Yeah, but we generally program the behaviors with the adult, and then we work on the model and the animations for the younger stages later. Come on. The mouse is really sensitive in this, and so it's kind of a pain in the butt. And I can't do that right now. Oh, they're good. There's a jump. Am I up? No.
That means your
Maybe.
game actually works.
Can you go into the water?
Yeah, swimming is a thing, I think.
Yay.
Drown.
I mean, you go.
It's like drowning in a
Walk
thing?
on the water.
The mouse is really sensitive and it's kind of going all over the place. There we go.
Did you turn into a different dinosaur?
Not in the middle of being one particular dinosaur. You pick your dinosaur from the beginning and then
No,
you,
I mean like in this game, like right now.
oh, well, it's the
So
lighting.
he's in the
Real quickly, 8 minutes before going to lunch, so if you need to go to the bathroom, go now. We're going to look at this for the next few minutes.
Yeah. I do have video footage of a more recent version. Let's see. Saurian.
Wait, Todd.
What's up?
So, how long is it going to be $20 for? Because I want to come in Costa
Don't bite
Rica.
me fast.
I'm going to be in Costa Rica when.
I think as long as early access is going, but I'll check with the developers and get
Is it
back.
going to be more expensive later?
Don't
Once
bite
it's
me
complete,
fast.
I would imagine it might be more expensive, but I don't know. That's like a long way off. Let's see.
So
Here
if
we
you
go.
get it for $20, you can update it,
Yeah,
Yeah,
the updates will come with it.
and you don't have to pay like.
So this is a more recent version, and this is one of the devs playing as one of the babies. Yeah, this machine is a little bit old, I guess.
Will there be sneezing?
I don't know, and that's such a non-gameplay
Bully.
thing.
Someone get the T-Rex.
Yes, Uncle T. Uncle
So,
Rex.
Jerry,
yeah,
this is
can
just
you
footage
please
of a
murder
more
this
recent version
Inquisitor?
that from like the
This
beginning of the
that's
month.
being really mean to me. Yeah, thanks, Uncle Rex.
Oh, dude. Try to climb the tree.
No, this is a video.
Yeah, okay, climb the tree, please. Sit.
It's a video.
Oh, it's gonna go for it.
So guys, this
Okay,
is
so
this
are you
is
gonna have-
footage, not gameplay.
Are you gonna have like
Or this
weather
footage.
variations, so like there are some droughts or something?
Yes, yes. So, Theo just asked about weather in this game. There are going to be dynamic, like climate events that are implemented later. So you get things like hurricanes and thunderstorms. Someone asked, there was a tyrannosaur back there. There is a gameplay mode where the premise is the meteor has hit the Earth, and now you are trying to survive in a post-impact system. So think back to the last day of the dinosaurs documentary, all the fire and the death and limited resources, and now you're competing against everyone
Oh, that's like
in much more
that's like
dire
hardcore
straits.
mode, right?
Yeah, it's like super hardcore.
That's like hardcore.
Hardcore, hardcore.
What's up?
Todd,
Oh,
if you
oh,
want to make
did
more
somebody
money,
win?
in your right.
Todd,
What?
if you want to make more money for the game, you should make the people pay for the DLCs.
We're probably not gonna do DLCs.
Dude, I'm subscribing to the Saurian.
I already subbed.
Dude, I need
Alright.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's 11:55, so now we gotta get going. That was super fun.
After lunch, we're gonna go to the computer lab and do a